This is Dr. Chris's Radio Horror Show at 91.3 FM, WCW in Worcester, Massachusetts. And tonight on the show, we have a very distinguished guest on the show with us, a composer of many great soundtracks to several amazing films and television series, such as Friday the 13th, the series, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, Forever Night, War of the Worlds, and Mean Girls, which was kind of interesting to also find out. We have on the show with us Fred Mollin, composer. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Fred.
Thank you so much, Chris.
The one that definitely stood out to me was Mean Girls, which you think about your other body of work, but you also worked at 90210 for a little while. So 90210 and Mean Girls have the same type of like high school attitude, problems.
I have to go on record. I didn't do the score for Mean Girls.
You worked on a soundtrack, right?
They used an episode of Friday the 13th, the series, in a scene where they're watching a scary thing on television, and so they used a bit of my music in that episode, in that scene.
Oh, okay. Because I was going over your IMDb credits and I noticed it said soundtrack, not composer. And I now I got to rewatch that movie to find out what episode of Friday the 13th the series was on that. Horror fans love it when they do things like that.
I'll dig out the cue sheet and find out. But no, I wish I had done the music for that. I love that film, but I did not do it.
And it was the Friday the 13th the series, not one of the movies that they had in the movie?
I'm not sure. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
When you came on the show for the Dead TV podcast a few months ago, one of the things that really stuck out to me was that you worked on Forever Night, and I grew up and loved Forever Night, the vampire, the 15th century vampire, 20th century cop TV series.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the music for that. Talk about the atmosphere for it, because the mood set on that show was incredible with the score the way it was.
The premise of the show, of course, is that he's a modern-day detective trying to sort of absolve himself of all his past vampire murders and lives. And but he can't stop drinking blood, and so we have these flashbacks all through the series that are all about his past lives. And so I had to sort of run, sort of interestingly enough, the first episode I scored after I had done demos, which Jim Parriott, the creator of the show, had loved, which were sort of very dark and gothic pipe organs and cathedral organs with very low string samples and choir and repetitive themes. He loved all that, and he loved the mood that it set. And actually, I remember the first episode, which is, the getting to know you episodes with me and the producer. And I remember that I brought in a trumpet player to augment my own layers of synth and samplers. And I had some jazz trumpet at times in the contemporary score scenes. And I remember that when Jim heard it on the soundstage mixing it, he called me and said, "I hate the trumpet." And, I was trying to get a little bit of contemporary jazz, out of just this complete dark, foreboding layers and layers of organs and synths and, strings and choir. And so I was sort of liking the trumpet. And the first thing Jim did was he goes, "I love everything." He said, "But I hate the trumpet. Get rid of it." So we went back in last minute and remixed without the trumpet. And, that set the stage for what was really a very gothic sounding score for all of the 3 seasons we did it. And it allowed me, unlike Friday the 13th, where every episode was different, on the 72 episodes of Friday the 13th, the series, because we were dealing with a cursed object of the week. Forever Night really did have a similarity in every episode, except for the flashbacks. And so I was able to really have and create a sound for the series. And that was a lot more fun, frankly, at times, and a little less stressful. The flashbacks were challenging. But, as far as how I created the mood, I just, I kept on going back to these, the dark elements of sound, like these, low strings and low, foreboding sounds and percussion and big sort of thick church organs full of reverb, and I made sort of a dark mess, frankly. And then I tried to make a couple of very hooky little motifs, which are all there in the opening theme.
Isn't it funny that you worked on the very first episode of the show, Dark Knight, and then the final episode last night as well, giving it the alpha and omega for the show, and you worked on some episodes in between those two. But as somebody that wasn't on every single episode like Friday the 13th, that's kind of unique. You get to be the alpha and omega composer for that series, and I love the first season and the second season. There are parts of the third season I enjoy, but I cannot stand for the life of me the final episode of the show. In fact, if I ever do a rewatch of it, I won't watch it. I just think that I hated what they did to all the characters at the very end. And that's nothing on you, but how do you feel? Like, because you invested in it.
Again, I want to correct you only, and I'm going to proudly correct you, because actually I scored every episode.
Oh, you did? Okay, IMDb only has you listed as like 14 episodes for some reason then.
Oh, my God. I scored, I guess it was all 3 seasons, so probably 60 or 70 episodes.
Yeah, you got to go on IMDb and check it out. It only lists you as the composer for 14, which is like, yeah.
No, that's a terrible shame, because I if we did 2 soundtrack albums that were culled from all 3 seasons. So
I have not had a chance to track down Forever Night soundtracks. Friday the 13th has been re-released in like a vinyl, so that's been a little easier to find. But I don't remember seeing Forever Night getting any kind of re-release, even during the big vampire boom that we had a few years ago. So if they're available, and affordable, I definitely want to track them down.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find them on iTunes, or you can certainly find them on I'm sorry, not iTunes, but Amazon. I'm sure we'll have them. But anyway, listen, I just wanted to let you know, I'm very proud to have said that I scored every single minute of that series.
That's fantastic. Because again, God, I forgot his name. The character, the DJ, that's Nick Sire.
Yes.
Kind of inspired me to want to do Radio of Horror at night in 2007 when I first started the show, because we were on originally at midnight. Now, the time that we're recording this, it's around 5:48 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and this will be broadcast at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But for 10 years, I did the show from midnight to 2 a.m., and I kind of felt like Nick's, Sire, Lacroix.
Yeah.
And I loved that he did that like dark midnight radio show. I hated when he became the club owner in season 3. I don't understand what.
Yeah.
Again, season three problems. Let me tell you.
Yeah. No, the question you asked, and as I said, as the composer of every single episode, I certainly have my favorites. I did. It was interesting. I hated that last night truly ended the show. I wanted it not to end, obviously. I guess it does leave room for, they could have possibly continued, I guess, in some form. But, it was an emotional show for me. So I probably wasn't very critical of it. I was more emotional the fact that it was ending. And I have to tell you that the one last cue, and I will not spoil the episode, but I remember that the last cue I wrote was the last cue of the series and the last cue of the show, that episode. And I remember that I put everything I had into that cue. It's probably one of my favorite things I've ever written for TV or film. And it only runs about a minute, but I felt like it was my favorite cue of all 3 seasons.
Did you ever have you ever been a DJ, or did you ever work at a radio station at any time in your life, like Lacroix?
LaCroix. No, I never did, but I've always wanted to.
Oh, you should. If you're ever in Massachusetts, you can come and host Radio Horror with me for a couple hours.
I'm telling you, that's not a threat. I may take you up on that.
I would love to have you on the show for 2 hours. We will spin some amazing music, and we will definitely chat it up for a couple of hours.
That's a deal.
Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mondo Records, but they've been putting all the soundtracks to the Friday the 13th movies out on these gorgeous-looking re-released vinyls with amazing new cover art. And Friday the 13th Part 5 was the last one that they put out. Do you think that have you heard anything about if they're going to be getting to 6, 7, and 8, which you did the scores for A New Blood and Jason Takes Manhattan?
Yeah, I certainly have not heard anything about it, but I'd love them to do it.
Well, they've done up to part 5. You got to think they're going to do 6, 7, and 8. I mean, 1 through 5 have sold out. I mean, there's very few copies left. I think of 1. I know they just re-released the first one. Harry's, Manfredi's original score finally got re-released because that vinyl came out, sold out like crazy. So they just announced the other day they're finally re-releasing a second printing of it. So I'm hoping that we'll get the New Blood and Jason Takes Manhattan as well, and you'll be able to get some I don't know, maybe do some linear notes or help with the recomposition with Mondo. I don't know how that works exactly when they re-release a score like that.
I'd love that.
You were on earlier, as we mentioned, for Friday the 13th, the series. How did you make it? Was there any challenges in making sure that the Friday the 13th TV series didn't sound like the scores for the movies that you just did? Because you kind of did them at the same time, right?
Yeah, well, I started with Friday the 13th, the series, and then at the end of the first season, which was spring, I got the call that they couldn't library all of the Harry Manfredini music they wanted to for Part 7, so would I come in and score about half of it using my synths and samplers? And so, yes, I had already done about, a good 20 episodes of the series. So I wasn't particularly, well versed in the movies, but I watched a few and I listened to Harry's score and I loved it. And I tried to emulate sort of what he did, but using, of course, I couldn't use real orchestra. There was no budget, so I just did my samplers and synths. So there was probably a little bit of Friday the 13th, the series, that sort of leaked into how I wrote for the movies.
Is there one particular episode score that you really enjoy the most?
Oh, on the Friday the 13th series?
On the Friday the 13th TV series.
I think my favorites are the Playhouse. I loved. I was very proud of that one. I was very proud of The Baron's Bride.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I really was very proud of that one, and I think there were others I felt equally as proud of. Certainly, The Quilt of Hathor, I was very proud of.
The Baron's Bride. That would be.
And I was proud of The Prophecies. That was another good one, I thought.
The Baron's Bride. Would that be a little bit of foreshadowing for Forever Night eventually?
Yeah, except it took place, of course, in, like, as you say, 16th century or something. But
yeah,
it probably gave me a little bit of an idea, but I tried to go a little more into that older style, and boy, I really loved that episode. That was a cool episode.
So the episode that appears in the movie Mean Girls from Friday the 13th, I wasn't able to find online. I was kind of hoping it would bring it up for me, but I definitely had to rewatch the movie to
You know what, Chris? I'm thinking that it was from one of the movies.
Okay.
And I think the cue was called The Flying TV or something. And I have no idea which movie it was from.
Oh, that would be a New Blood. That's the one that's nicknamed Carrie versus Jason, because she's like Carrie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, that's what it is, and it was from that movie.
And I almost think it's got to be that, because I remember Kane Hodder talking about, like, and did anyone ever see Mean Girls? Like him making a joke at a panel once. Did you worked on one episode of War of the Worlds? Did you work on more that IMDb doesn't have listed?
Yeah, War of the Worlds, I was in the middle of the first season of Friday the 13th, and they were doing War of the Worlds first season at the same time, and Frank Mancuso Jr. called me and said, we're going to change up things because I'm going to run that show now, and a lot of the people on Friday the 13th are going to be involved. He said, would you like to be involved? And I said, absolutely. So he said, would you do the new theme, and would you do the TV series? And I don't think I was able to. I was already doing My Secret Identity, the New Gidget, and Friday the 13th, the series, at the same time. So I wasn't able to score War of the Worlds as episodic series. However, they had found a guy in New York who had done a theme they liked. And he came to Toronto, and we worked on the opening theme together. And we basically used his idea for the opening theme, and I embellished it. And then I wrote the end theme, which they used for the second season. And I sort of liked that a lot. I was actually quite proud of that one. And and I did score the first episode of the second season.
We are going to cover War of the Worlds on the Dead TV podcast coming up probably in 2020. After we're currently doing the Addams Family, and then we're going to do Witchblade the series, and then we'll get to War of the Worlds. I just found out they re-released War of the Worlds the series from Mill Creek.
Nice.
Yeah, all 40 episodes on one DVD this time instead of like broken up into sets.
Nice.
Which I'm really excited about. So it's a little easier to come by than the original sets, which are completely out of print from Paramount.
Yeah, I was very proud of that one episode we did, but I remember now, Chris. I could not do it. It was to do another hour-long music-reliant action series while I was doing Secret Identity, Friday the 13th, and the new Gidget. I couldn't do anymore.
My Secret Identity, was that the show with the kid with the superpowers?
Yeah, it was actually a young Jerry O'Connell.
Right. The who would one day play Superman in the Death and Return of Superman animated movies.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy, and he was a wonderful kid, and that was a fun show to do. I did 2 seasons of it.
You broke into sci-fi a little bit more later on with Tech War, based on William Shatner's novels. Did you enjoy that show?
I did. That was fun too. The people I had worked with on a series called Beyond Reality, which was on USA Network, and I loved the 2 guys, Hans Beimler and Richard, and I forget Richard's last name. Sorry, but they were lovely guys, and I loved working with them. And then they got the Tech War series from USA Network, which was a very hands-on project of a series for them. But for William Shatner, he was just involved literally peripherally. So actually, I never got to meet him. And I do remember, though, that I did when I was doing the theme for Tech War, which is also one of my favorite pieces. I actually, I have to tell you, there's a lot of stuff I've done, and so when I say something is my favorite or one of my favorites, it's sort of rare because a lot of what I did, was all about deadlines. But one of the themes I love most, I love the Forever Night theme, I love the Friday the 13th theme, and I really love the Tech War theme. It was a very exciting opening, and I really loved what I had done. And I remember the closest I got to actually spending time with William Shatner was when I was doing my theme. I actually had to, the guys, Ricky and Hans, who were the producers, they loved what I had done, and I really was quite proud of it. And they said to me, William Shatner's in Vegas, and he's going to want to hear the theme over the phone to make sure that he likes it. And of course, in those days, I couldn't send him an MP3, so I did have to play it to him over the phone. And what I did was, and of course, this is, I'm telling you a secret. What I did was, I was sitting in front of my Kurzweil 250, which is what I would sequence all my tracks on. And I could isolate tracks by hitting a button. And I got William Shatner on the phone. He was in Vegas for some reason. And I sort of made a white lie. And I said, I'm just writing the theme now. And I really had written and already recorded it. But it was all on digital. It was all, I was able to take, elements out of it. And I said, do you have a minute where I can play you some ideas of the theme? So I was sort of fibbing a bit, and hoping for the best. So I started to play him the drums only, because I could take it all out of the sequencer except for the drum percussion stuff. And he said, "Oh, I like that." He goes, "It's very, very energetic. I like that." I said, "Well, that's great." He said, "Now, here's an idea I had for the melody of the hook." And I had one synth sound that was very biting and very cool, and I just soloed that. I muted everything else, and I soloed that lick. And he goes, "Oh, I like that." He said, "Could you add?" And he said something like, "Could you add more to that?" And I said, "Yeah, hold on." And I sort of pretended I was doing something. And I added more things by hitting a button because I'd already done them. And luckily, he just loved it. But I really sort of got him on board more by letting him be a part of the composition. And by the way, that's a trick that is not the first time any of us have done that. It's actually quite common because you want to get the producers and the creators of the show really on board with what you write. And the best way to do it, frankly, is not to surprise them. and say, don't, the worst thing you can say to directors of movies or producers of TV series when you're writing the music is to say, trust me. Actually, you should say, would you please collaborate with me? And then they love that, and then you do get a chance, of course, to get into their heads and understand what they like. And frankly, you do a better job for them, and that's all that matters. If they love it, that's all that matters.
Last question before we let you go is, what are you currently working on and doing right now?
Well, Chris, you know that after starting my career as a singer-songwriter and performer, and then early on becoming a record producer and arranger, I fell into, in 1984 and 85, I fell into composing for TV and film. I had to make a decision because I got very successful quite early on with that. I had to make a decision to put my record production and record music arranging away. And so for a good, from 85 till about 2001, I scored television and film nonstop and had a wonderful run with it. But I did, in fact, I got really burnt out. I was able to be so proud of the 15 years I had done it without a break. And it was an amazing challenge, and I'm really proud of the fact that I got through it. And around 2001, I wanted to make a life change anyway, and I moved to Nashville to go back to making records again full time, because frankly, I always felt that was one of the things I was the best at, and I always loved working with other musicians and making other artists sound good and sort of helping them make their masterpieces on record. And so I've been producing records pretty well nonstop since 2001. And at the moment, I am, I'm finishing an album for a wonderfully eccentric legacy artist named Bat McGrath. I'm just finishing touches on an album for a group that actually started in 1967 called the Ides of March from Chicago. And they had a big hit in 67 or 68 called Vehicle. And we are doing this is like a big reunion album we're doing. I finished that. And we're just putting some finishing touches on the mixes. And then I'm also involved in a couple of new projects, one with an artist out of England named Rumour, who's got a wonderful voice and has made beautiful records out of the UK. And I'm going to produce her first album recorded in the US, and that will start next month. And it's been busy. It's been a busy career and a busy life. And, like I said, I'm still very, very proud of my work on TV and film, and equally as proud of the fact that I can still make records and make an artist sound great and fulfill their vision. Those are the two things I'm good at, Chris. I think the rest of my life I suck at.
I don't think that's true. Otherwise, it would influence your work, and your work is amazing.
I think I'm really good at about three things.
Well, Fred, we appreciate you taking some time to come back on the show, come on the Radio of Horror show to talk in a lot more detail about a lot more of your career besides Friday the 13th.
I'm honored to be here. It's wonderful that people can remember the music and love it and listen to it. And I'm honored always to be a part of that world.
And as soon as we track down a copy of the Forever Night soundtrack, I'm definitely going to play it in its entirety on the Radio of Horror show, one season at a time.
Well, there's two volumes, and you should get both. They're terrific. I'm very proud of them, and I autographed 30 still sealed vinyl albums of the Friday the 13th, the series soundtrack, and I autographed them, and my friend Gabe is selling them through his site on eBay. They're still sealed vinyl. It's amazing. I found 30.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Fred, thank you so much again for coming on the show with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, listen, I'm a big fan of yours now, Chris. Thank you.